Well, hello everyone. I am Mark Turi, and welcome back to my channel. I hope that everyone is doing good today. Um, I see that we have one of our Mark Apostles here. Peter Anderson, you're always here. I have a list, by the way, of my Mark Apostles, and Peter Anderson sits at number 4. So I have a few more, of course. I still have up to 12. So we have spots 6 to spot 12 still remaining. You don't have to pay me anything unless, of course, you want to. And then I will send you a PayPal link if you want. We have a Mark Postle. I was going to say apostle, but that's too sacrilegious. We have Mark Postle number 2, Joe Giuseppo. How are you, Joe? I hope that you are doing well today. Thank you so much for being here. Joe, are you a Star Trek fan? I can never remember because that's what we're going to talk about today. I kind of hope in one way you are and in one way you're not. If you are a fan, you might get a little bit more out of what I'm talking about. But if you're not a fan and you have access to watching some of these episodes, just one off episodes, because I'm going to talk about 10 of them, that's a bit too much. But if you just want to watch one or something or two or three, I think this will be a really good starting point for some as well. And we have Mark Postle. I always have to check my list twice. Irish artist Mark Postle number 3. I should know this off the top of my head, but it's been a long day, been a long week, um, but it's been good. It's just been long. That's all. Mark Postle so far. Chad is number 1, who is our Judas. Joe Giuseppe number 2, Irish Mart number 3, Peter Anderson number 4, and Shell and I decided she would be number 5. So again, I have spaces open from 6 to 12, and then unfortunately I have to cut it off. But I might after that if I get more fans, because thankfully my channel has been growing quite a bit, and I'll get into some channel analytics in a second. Uh, but maybe I'll create a quorum of the 12, like they do in the Mormon LDS Church. They have a quorum, which is a great word. I just love that word, quorum. I've said it 3 times now. I won't say it again, but I enjoy it. Yes, Mart Puzzles. Yes, but it's good to see everybody here. Um, Briefly, last week, I actually celebrated my birthday. It was my birthday last Saturday, so not yesterday, but the one before. On the 15th of February is my birthday. I turned 42 years old. I know I don't look it. I try not to act like it. I don't know how you're supposed to act like a 42-year-old. I certainly don't have my SHIT together like my parents did when they were 42. They had a house and they were married uh, with 2 children, which, by the way, doesn't mean you have your stuff together because, my parents are divorced and my, father's passed away now. But I guess if that's having your stuff together, I don't have it together. But I celebrated my 42nd birthday. On the 13th, I traveled by train from Budapest to Vienna, one of my favorites. And we've got Shell. I'm going to start some of your comments, but I had to point out that we have almost all of our living Mark Postles. I don't know where Chad is. Chad said he might be able to show up today. That would be incredible if all of our Mark Postles showed up. I think that's got to be some kind of miracle. Um, got to be some kind of miracle, I guess. I don't know. Um, we'll be blessed and so forth for the next year. Maybe we'll do that. Um, but definitely thank you, Shel, for being here. I hope everything is well with you. But so yeah, I celebrated my 42nd birthday last week. So on Friday, I took the bus to from Budapest to Vienna. Vienna is also one of my favorite cities in the world, and it's only a 2-hour train ride, 2.5 hours, that pretty much. And I stayed until Monday, so I basically stayed for the weekend. I visited a couple of museums. I visited the wine country, which is just an hour north of Vienna. in a city called Grinzig. I ate schnitzel, vegetarian schnitzel, by the way, which they had on the menu at a place there. So it was actually really good. I drank some beer. Um, I listened to a free classical music concert, and I went to some shopping malls. I saw some really nice paintings. I went to a museum called the Albertina, and I saw some Monets, which again is my favorite artist, some Picassos, of course, Gustav Klimt, who was an Austrian painter. So I saw a lot of his work. And also, I forget the first name of this gentleman, but his name was Sissy or Sisley. I think it's Sissey or Ley. Believe he was French. He was also an impressionist painter. So I got to see, and some Picassos. So it was really cool, although it was really busy because I went on Saturday, the day of my birthday. But I can't complain. I did some tours. I went to the Schönbrunn Palace. I went to the Hofburg Palace, where I visited the Vienna Armory, which is really cool. And then I went to, what was that museum? It's called the Austrian House, and it was a small museum of Austrian history, so specifically the history of Austria. And they had a really interesting section on the Jewish community of Austria. Previously, I had also gone around, well, 7 years ago now, in 2018, I went to the Jewish Museum in Vienna. So, there's quite a big Jewish community there. Theodor Herzl, for example, one of the founders of Zionism, lived there most of his life. Was born here in Budapest, but lived in Austria, in Vienna. And yeah, anyways, it was really cool. One thing that kind of pissed me off, and has nothing to do with Vienna itself necessarily, but there's a square in Vienna called Karol Luga Platz. And if you guys know who Karol Luga was, he was the anti Semitic mayor of Vienna, which attempted to expel and get rid of all the Jews. So I don't know why they have a Platz named after him or a square named after him. I just discovered that. But another cool thing was, um, next to the capital central station, the central train station is Vienna, is a street called Karl Popper Strasse. And if you know me, in my philosophy stuff, you know that I like Karl Popper. So that was cool. And we have every single one of my Mark Apostles here today. This is remarkable. This is like, I think we're going to have another Mount Sinai situation on here. Judas We have Judas Chad. We have Joe, who's number 2. We have Irish Mart number 3. Peter Anderson 4. Shell number 5. Again, I'm still selling. uh, what did the Catholic Church sell that Martin Luther didn't like? Penitence or something like that? Somebody remind me. I'm selling those. If you want to get in at number 6 until number 12, it's good real estate. I can't guarantee salvation. I mean, nobody can. Plus the fact that I'm Jewish, it's not like, I'm gonna convert you or anything. I just think it's a funny title. Um, Maybe what we'll do is do a Patreon meritorious members like they do for the International Association of Scientologists. And the more you donate to my war chest, the more the more of those indulgences. Thank you, Joe. The more indulgences that you'll get. But I can't guarantee any spiritual salvation. I don't think anybody can really. But, who knows, right? Those indulgences. Oh, that Martin Luther. Talk about another anti-Semite. Um, for my thesis, I read a multi-volume works of Martin Luther. And again, anyone who here is Lutheran or grew up Lutheran, it's not obviously this is not a personal attack, but Martin Luther did write a series of essays called "The Jews and Their Lies." I finished every single volume recently, and I feel terrible about myself. And today I was looking at anti-Semitic cartoons printed in papers throughout Central Europe, and I always feel like crap. That's why it's been a long day. Um, you know what I mean? Lord. Anywho, um, but I am good. I hope you all are too. it's a miracle that we have our Mark Apostles. And I said, number 6 to number 12 is still up for grabs, if you would like. We do again have our Judas, that is Chad. Chad will in the future betray me, but I'll be okay with it. I'll be fine. It'll be okay, you know. Yeah, I do this to myself. I know I do this to myself, but yeah. I have to read some stuff from Carl Luger, which was not flattering. Then I had to read some stuff from and again, if anyone here is Christian, but in Vienna and especially in Austria, they had a Christian party, which at the time was very anti-Semitic. It's now morphed into the Christian Democratic parties, which are all across Europe, and they're not anti-Semitic. So, for example, like Angela Merkel was part of the Christian Democratic Party in Germany. They're very pro-Jewish, very tolerant. I think there's one in Austria as well. But some of the remnants of those parties, they go back to some pretty nasty anti-Semitism. Thankfully, things have changed. Thankfully, want to obviously stress that. But yeah, then the political cartoons. Um, then I read about a couple of guys. I don't remember their names because they're long Romanian names, but two of them that went into villages and gave the Jewish community 24 hours to vacate, and they forcibly removed them to Bucharest. So I read about 100 pages about those two guys. One of the guys was AC Kuza. Anyway, I'm getting besides my part the point here, but anywho, um, so essentially, yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone. As I said, I was away last week, so I came home on Monday, and so I started my week off there. So we're going to continue throughout this month. I think there's 5 Sundays in March. One, two, three, four, five. So look out, please, on from next week, March 2nd. Look out for a poll that I will uh, get done by the end of the week, and I will take some time until about Sunday for me, maybe Sunday afternoon, evening. I'm thinking about writing the poll, giving you all the choices, and then like saying, okay, this is the date. Like the due date will be maybe, or the due time might be maybe 2 or 3 hours before my time. So we go live at 9 p.m. my time. So maybe I'll leave it to like 6 p.m. Of March 2nd. Um, so anywho, I can do that, but I'll give you two options because there's a lot going on in the world, and I really appreciate y'all coming here. As far as analytics is concerned, I've been very happy to have more than 500 subscribers. I'm sitting around 650, and I have had more than enough views. So I've just applied for YouTube partnership, and I'm going to continue to do more posting, which I've been doing all over the place, which got my initial subscriber counts and my initial view counts up. And so I'm at, I think, 3,500. I think it's either watch hours, and that's just happened within the past couple weeks. And again, I've gained like five 550, 600 subscribers. Um, so I've been very happy, and hopefully I will get, uh, I will get a partnership because that way it'll grow my channel and so forth. And I think that will be really nice to do because it's just growing very slowly. But I've been very happy that this kind of content at least is reaching people. And like I say, if something happens and I stay at this, well, I've got already my Mark Apostles who are all here today. And so I really do it for you guys. And I appreciate you all so much. You know that I do. Um, so let's move on to the topic at hand. Um, Today, I'm going to go through a PowerPoint. I haven't done a PowerPoint since this year, but my PowerPoint is on, a pop culture topic. I do want to say too that my Twilight Zone video has around 9,500 views, almost 10,000 views. That is freaking remarkable. So I'm hoping this one does really good as well. And you know how much I love The Twilight Zone. It's in my top three favorite television shows of all time. And this, Star Trek The Next Generation, is definitely in my top three. I always say it's my favorite Star Trek show, but like coming in at a close second is Deep Space Nine. I may do a top 10 Deep Space Nine in the future. You know, who knows? I was going to do a top 10 Simpsons maybe next month. We'll workshop that. But definitely my favorite Star Trek The Next Generation episodes will be done now, today. I wanted to get in very briefly before I start the PowerPoint about my history, my brief history of my own history with Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation. So, as I mentioned earlier, I just turned 42 years old, which means I was born in 1983. Star Trek The Next Generation would premiere in 1987 when I was just 4 years old. So, between the ages of 4 until I was in 1994 when it went off the air, I was 11. So definitely towards the end of the run, the last couple of seasons, I started watching it weekly, but it wasn't already probably at least in its fourth, fifth, sixth, and definitely seventh season. And so I remember, which I think this is a really cool thing, was you all probably know if you are fans that the very final episode, so it was a two-parter episode called All Good Things, which aired, I guess, in the spring of 1994. I was 11. I want to say I was in the fifth grade, and I had a friend named Paul, and his father worked for a company, a media company in Toronto. And Paul, his father, and myself, we had tickets to go see the live feed, the live episode feed of All Good Things Part One and Two when it was aired at the Sky Dome in Toronto, Canada. For those of you who know, that's where I was born and raised in Toronto. I think it's called the Rogers Centre now, or something different. It'll always be Sky Dome to me, where I saw numerous, Blue Jays games, and I even saw a Toronto Raptors game during their very, very first season back in the day. Toronto Argonauts play there as well. That's the Canadian football team. And Paul's father, myself, and Paul, we had a boxed seat, so like a VIP boxed seat, with a couple other people with Paul's company who were Star Trek fans. And we had like a buffet, and there was an open bar. Had I been older, obviously, but we had a buffet. We had nachos. We had some hot dogs. It was actually really cool. And I just remember being in Skydome on the Jumbotron watching, the final two episodes. And I remember looking down and looking up and seeing people cosplaying. So a lot of people in like, Starfleet officer uniforms. We saw Klingons and Borg and Romulan. It was really cool. It was like the first time I ever saw cosplay, especially Star Trek cosplay. So continuing from that, when I, um, would go off the air when I was 11. So when I was in high school, um, maybe eighth grade, actually maybe eighth, ninth grade until the end of college. So now we're talking, let's say maybe 96, 7 until around maybe 2001, excuse me, around 2005 rather. I remember, and I'm going to get the station here. I'm pretty sure Chad would know the station because I've mentioned before on here in Toronto, Canada. When you grow up in Toronto, we get NBC, ABC, CBS, PBS, Fox, but all of those stations come through Buffalo and Western New York. So the Fox affiliate in Buffalo is it WNED? I'm going to look at this. W something. WUTV. I think WNED is PBS. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's Channel 29 in Buffalo, and it gets broadcast in Toronto. So WUTV. And at Fridays and Saturdays around midnight, maybe 11 and 12, I think it was, they would air on the Fox 29 station. They would air reruns, and I don't remember exactly seeing any episodes from the first two seasons. I remember seeing a lot of episodes from what I like to call the sweet spot of TNG, which is 100% from season threes, four, five, and six. And then season seven kind of teeters off, but I did see episodes there. So I might have missed like the first 2 years because I think how some stations do it is they buy the rights to every episode, which in TNG is 176, and they may have like, you know, um, aired them in order, but I'm not really sure. Anyway, long story short, I used to go to sleep from like 96, 97 to like 2005, like 8 years or 7, 8 years, watching episodes. Friday nights, I think, was at 11. And I want to say Saturdays was either at 12 or 12:30, and there'd be two different episodes. And I often actually I have access now to streaming services, so I often will watch an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation just before I go to sleep because that final theme, if you've ever seen the show, the final credit theme, um, I used to listen to that quite often before I would, go to sleep. And then around college and after college, we had a channel called City TV, and City TV had a specialty channel called the Sci-Fi. Not not the Sci-Fi Network? That might be the American one. Anyway, now it's called CTV Sci-Fi. It doesn't matter what it used to be called in Toronto. And every like afternoon, they would like air, I think at 12 or something, they'd air one episode of the original series. 1 o'clock would be TNG. 2 o'clock would be Deep Space Nine, and then like 3 o'clock would be Voyager. And by the time I was getting into my early 20s and stuff, we could time shift. So I could actually, watch what would be the 12 p.m. The 12 p.m. TOS episode. I could watch it in the Vancouver City TV area. So I could watch it at 3, and I'd watch like 4 of those episodes in a row. And of course, TNG was a part of that. And then for a little while, I didn't really watch much Star Trek until Netflix bought the rights to have Star Trek, which it doesn't have anymore, in 2011. And that summer, I literally binged. I was actually coming back from Los Angeles to Toronto, and I binged every episode of the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. And then since then, past couple of years, I've done TNG quite a few times. And of course, I've done Deep Space Nine quite a few times. I tried to get through Voyager. It's a struggle to me. Enterprise is a struggle, especially season 3. And then the original series, really, the season 3 is not very good, but there are some good gems there that I will watch, when I'm bored and stuff like this. So that's just me. I love Star Trek. I used to go to conventions. I just very, very much love it. So now you know that I'm a huge nerd, which I hope doesn't. I hope it doesn't change your opinion of me. I'm going to go through a couple start questions before we get into our thing, and then I'll do start questions afterwards. Peter Anderson says, when all 5 lions emerge, they form Voltron. What happens when all 5 marked apostles? You know what? If you want it to be a lion, I'm not going to tell you no. I'm not going to say you're messing with Voltron here. I'm not going to tell you no about that. Question: does a Mark Postle get magical underpants? I need to see the benefits. How about we say yes with a maybe and no with a but? But Huckleberry, if you would like to apply for spot number 6, there's no application fee. You can just do it. I will be more than happy to have you as my 6th apostle. Magical underwear. That is Mormon. Yes, that is very Mormon. Actually, in the summer of 2011, when I was binging all of that, I was living for a month. I found because I had a visa issue, not an issue, but I was on a student visa and I left Los Angeles in June. And I don't remember why. It wasn't a visa issue, but I don't remember why. But I went to Salt Lake City and I spent a month living in Salt Lake City. I found this cheap apartment for $300 a month, a studio, and I spent a month, and then I came back um, to to Canada. Maybe there was something with my mom's apartment or something where I couldn't go back. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Maybe she was being renovated or something. But I spent a month in Salt Lake City. Great city. To the Mormon stuff is a bit weird. I went to Provo. I went to all these different places, and yeah, Spanish Fork. So not my bag, but I did get to go to a place called Deseret Book, which is at the City Creek Mall, which is owned by the Mormons, and I got to ask some questions about that. So there you go. The new Germanic Chancellor. Oh, okay. It's from Angela Merkel's party. There we go. Thank you, Joe. I get to vote for each of my personalities. Vote one and vote two. That's good. I remember living in Tahoe when the first episode of TNG aired. Oh, and my husband and I were so excited to see up 4 Point Station, correct? And DeForest Kelly is in that one. Mark Terry ST puts Huck and I to sleep as well. Yeah. Um, I watch it each night before bed and I wake up and can't fall back to sleep. I put it on. Yeah, it's so good, isn't it? It's the best. It's the best, man. I love it. Pluto TV has Star Trek. Okay, Next Generation. The price now in my area. I have old TV recordings of the next gen. Quality's not good for me. So the rabbit ears, I remember that too. TNG is like my Ambien. Yeah. Well, let's go to my PowerPoint presentation. And before I do that, I obviously want to preface the fact, first of all, I'm going to go, yeah, I want to preface the fact that um, these are just my favorite episodes, right? This is not a best of list. So, first thing to note, as I mentioned just before this, was there was 176 episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation across 7 seasons. That's a lot. Okay. Um, and so I'm naming 10 episodes, and two of which are two-parters. So 12 episodes. That means 164 episodes I cannot do. It's just too much. So if you find an episode that you love that's not on my list, do not worry. Please comment if you want to hear my opinions about it, if that's what you want to do. If you're watching on the replay, put it in the comments. And I pretty much remember most of the episodes by name, but if for some reason I'll look it up on my phone or give me a brief little synopsis like whatever. Um, let me think. Uh, oh, uh, you know what? Sub Rosa, which is a terrible episode. Just say that's the one with Crusher's grandmother who falls in love with, or Crusher falls in love with a ghost, and I'll be like, yeah, that's a bad episode. It's terrible, a terrible, terrible episode. However, I'll remember it. So please, let's start with that. The other thing is, I am going to go to full screen, and when I'm at full screen, I cannot see the live chat, but I will go back and forth between that. Also, by the way, because I'm getting a little bit bigger and a little bit stuff now, a little bit bigger as far as context and people. If anybody wants to come on and star my comments for me and moderate, I know no one's here is doing anything, but just leave a message and I'll bring you on if you want to start my comments if that's something you'd like to do. I know I'm still a small creator, so I can still kind of do it, but when I do my PowerPoints, especially, excuse me, I have to go to full screen. So anyway, these are my favorite top 10 favorite with the two double features of the two parts. So we're going to start now with my number 10. My number 10 is Who Watches the Watchers? I'm sure most of you know this episode, but I have included in this, of course, a synopsis which comes from IMDb, and then a photo, and of course that tells more about the story. As most of you know, who probably know this episode, it's a very early episode, just episode 4 from season 3. For those who love Star Trek The Next Generation, you probably know the first 2 seasons are rocky. First season has a lot of trouble finding its footing. It has a really bad episode called Code of Honor, where they're fighting I guess, like an all African thing. It's terrible. And they have some really, it was the first season. Second season comes on. They get Pulaski, who doesn't really mesh well, and whatever, because Dr. Crusher, Gates McFadden, is on maternity leave. And it starts to get a little better. The Measure of a Man is a good episode. This, starts to find its footing. And then by episode 3, particularly, I think starting with this episode, it's kind of at one point quintessentially Star Trek. It's reminiscent of TOS, the original series. And I think from this point on, but although I do like the first 3 episodes of season 3, but definitely it's setting a new precipice of what's to come. So in this episode, we have a proto-Vulcan culture worships Captain Picard and prepares to offer Counselor Troy as a sacrifice. If we look at the photo, we can see Jean-Luc Picard, played by Patrick Stewart, and the people to the right, in the center here, are the Mintakans. And they say proto-Vulcan because the Vulcans, the Romulans, and the Rigelians, and the Mintakans all have a common genetic ancestor. But on this particular planet, the Mintakans are at least about 1,000 years, you know, maybe, or more, maybe 2,000 years at this time, because yeah, we're looking at like the 2300s. So actually, maybe it's a little bit more than that. Um, Behind technologically. So it looks like they're kind of in maybe Earth's like Middle Ages, Renaissance period, maybe. Of course, we know that the Federation and Starfleet are not allowed to interfere with the natural evolution of a society, which is called the Prime Directive. And so in this episode, the Enterprise goes to this Mintakan planet, where there is a station on the planet that has a cloaking device and sort of a holographic device, because there's a scientific station that is being cloaked and looks like a rock formation. And I can't remember if it was seismic activity or something, but the actual device itself, the cloak or the hologram, stops working. And of course, we have 2 Mintakans. One is a father, who's played by the actor Ray Weiss, who you may know from Twin Peaks. If you're a fan of Twin Peaks, he plays Laura Palmer's father. And then we have a younger, his daughter, and they discover this, and of course, it goes against the Prime Directive. The father gets injured. He's beamed aboard the Enterprise. He's going in and out of consciousness, and people are, giving a lot of respect and reverence to Picard. And of course, he starts to believe that Picard is a god, and he's got to go down to the Mintakans and say, "No, don't sacrifice Counselor Troy," whom Counselor Troy and Riker end up getting captured by the Mintakans as they try to infiltrate the village to sort of settle everything down. It's a great episode. And as I said, this is one of those episodes where even if you don't like Star Trek or you've never seen Star Trek before, this is a really good introduction, because it sort of it's like it introduces us to the Prime Directive. You'll be introduced to Picard. You're introduced to this alien species, which is like the Vulcans, and some of the conflict that goes around there, which I think is very, very interesting. And it is very reminiscent of a original series type of you know um, what you call it, original series episode. which is really great writing, a great concept. Very much a Roddenberry episode too. He was still alive at this point. He passed away in 1991. So I want to say this is like what 87, 88, 88, 89, 80, yeah, 89, 90. So very good writing, very entertaining, and a very good introduction to the Star Trek franchise and so forth. So that is Who Watches the Watchers. Number 9 is a fan favorite. It's obviously one of my favorites. Um, it's a very light-hearted episode. It's very funny in a very dry way, I think, which is Data's Day. And of course, Data has this almost childlike innocence, and this is really highlighted in this episode, which comes from season 4, episode 11. As it says here, Data tries to comprehend the complex emotions behind O'Brien and Keiko, who are about to be married. This is noteworthy, number one, because Data, of course, is an android, an artificial life form, who cannot perceive emotions. And during, of course, the 7 seasons of the show, much like Mr. Spock, he is baffled by human emotions. He learns a lot from Geordi and observing human behavior. And then when we get to the movies, he does get an emotional chip and so forth and does kind of change. But this episode, again, starts off, by the way, with Data giving a personal log in which he says that the day that he's doing this is the day of Diwali, which Diwali is the Hindu festival of lights. So that is considered a religious holiday, which some people will say that there is religion in Star Trek. It's just, maybe more cultural. But I think it's interesting that Diwali is mentioned. Um, he mentions the people, he mentions things like births and couples making love and all this kind of stuff. And again, in this very matter of fact kind of way, but he has this commitment because he is going to be a part of O'Brien and Keiko's wedding. This is also noteworthy for being Keiko O'Brien's very first episode. She would end up, being a slightly recurring character in the next few seasons, but would go over to Deep Space Nine. And certainly in the first few seasons, Keiko O'Brien is seen more. She's a more of a regular character, and then becomes sort of semi-recurring throughout the series. But she's great in this. She's very interesting. I do think, as I watch back now, Keiko does kind of play that 1990s kind of nagging wife kind of trope. But I still think she's really good. She's just written for the time, unfortunately. But in this one, we have 2 scenes that I absolutely love. And of course, this is the one. This is the photo here of when Dr. Crusher, who's of course on the right of the photo, and Data, who's on the left. Uh, Data goes to, or actually communicates over the comm with Crusher. Dr. Crusher asks her if she could teach him how to dance, especially dance for the wedding. And they go to the holodeck, I should say, which you see in the background, which is like a dance. What do you want to call it? A dance floor or a dance room, or I'm not even sure what the word is here. Studio, I guess, is the best word. A dance studio. What's really cool about this is that Gates McFadden, the actor, of course, who plays Dr. Crusher, she would choreograph the entire routine that you see in this very funny, lighthearted scene that I love. I think it's actually one of my favorite, scenes in Star Trek history, where again, Data is like stepping on her feet and is tap dancing and all this kind of thing, and it's just really funny. And she says she doesn't want anyone to know that she was a dance teacher because they used to call her the dancing doctor and all this kind of thing. And then, of course, there is a scene where Data informs O'Brien in a very matter of fact way that Keiko is called off the wedding. Of course, spoiler alert, she doesn't in the end, but he says, of all the spoiled, selfish things, and Data's completely oblivious, and Jordy's like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have said it that way. Anyway, it's cute, it's charming. It's a lot of fun. Again, maybe another one for those who sort of wanna just have a nice lighthearted kind of, introduction to Star Trek because it's really about Data, and, yeah, he's just this fascinating character. Brent Spiner's unbelievable, and certainly this is, one of his best performances, and again, a huge fan favorite, so for me, Data's Day is number 9. After this, we switch gears to a definitely more serious, dramatic, um, and also kind of a mystery thriller, which is number 8. That's The Drumhead from season 4, episode 21. In this episode, a retired admiral, who I believe is named Admiral Satie, if I'm not mistaken, boards the Enterprise in an effort to determine the actions aboard the ship surrounding an act of sabotage and possible treason. So the first thing is, we can see here, I want to direct your attention in this photo to the two actors on the right of the photo. The gentleman who is standing with the sash in yellow is Lieutenant Worf. Of course, he is a main cast member. But sitting in the chair is a guest star, and he is a Klingon engineer who has come aboard the Enterprise on what's that word again? On an exchange, which we do see, I think, in season 2. There's an episode where Riker goes to a on exchange to a Klingon vessel. So they take this Klingon gentleman in, and he's working in engineering, and there's an explosion in the warp core. So there's possible sabotage, and he, the Klingon gentleman who's sitting again on the chair on the right, is the main suspect. And of course, he's saying the only reason why you suspect me is because I'm Klingon. Well, of course, it had to do with the dilithium crystal chamber. That's a whole thing, dilithium crystals I can't get into, but something happened. He works on there, so he's being suspect. So then they have to create this hearing, this trial to determine what happened and if it was sabotage. Now you can see the actors that are in the background here sitting by that desk to the sort of center right there. On the far right on the desk, of course, is Patrick Stewart, Captain Picard. In the middle, the young woman who is standing is an assistant to the older woman who is on the left side of that desk, and that is retired Admiral Satie. You also see that there is a gentleman sitting in the foreground with the gray top, gray, gray shirt. That's another one of her assistants. Okay. What happens in this episode is the trial that is happening turns into, for lack of a better word, I guess a shit show. It turns into a kangaroo court, which is another one for Drumhead. And essentially, what happens, and again, I have to spoil some of these episodes. I do apologize, but I still think you should go back and watch them. Is that the Klingon officer had nothing to do with it. They also bring a young crewman first class named Simon Tarsus, which is the first time, or at least one of the first times, an enlisted personnel. So, in the military, especially in like the Navy, for example, you have officers, ensign, lieutenant, junior grade, lieutenant commander, commander, captain, and then the admirals. But there's also enlisted personnel, which start in Star Trek as crewmen, third class, first class, third class, second class, first class. Then there's petty officers, third, second, first, and then there's the chief petty officer. That's Miles O'Brien, and then they have a senior chief and a master chief petty officer. Regardless, it's one of the first times you really get to see that, oh, there are actual enlisted personnel in Starfleet and on the Enterprise. So this gentleman, it turns out, Simon Crewman Tarsus, is a quarter Romulan. And then that takes the trial into a whole different way. And what I love is at the very end of this episode, Picard gives a quote that was quoted by Admiral Setie's father, who was a JAG officer, Judd Advocate General, a lawyer from Starfleet. and it really ticks off Admiral Satie and Picard and another admiral who's actually an African American man just kind of stand up and leave. It's so good. Everyone is just it's like Karen, like, 2.0. This poor Admiral Seti trying to do good turns this trial into, to a show trial, into a kangaroo court, completely ruins her image. And it's a quote by her father. The African American admiral was no lines, just kind of shakes his head, gets up, and leaves. And, in the end, there was no malice. So it's one of my favorite episodes. I will say, too, what's interesting about this is it gives us a little bit of light into Deep Space Nine. Because, of course, in Deep Space Nine, the Federation is seen as less than perfect and willing to go to great lengths to justify the means, for their ends to justify the means. Section 31, um, and so forth. With Cisco many times, for sure. So I think that this kind of shows that the people in the Federation are still corruptible, and that even they, with good, honest, pure, moral values, that Starfleet officers, retired or active officers, can still do very malicious type things. And Worf, by the way, is used in this one, very malleable. Worf is kind of used as a henchman by Admiral Satie and her staff, and so even Worf at the end kind of has like I guess like a come to God moment, or one of these kind of things where he's like, oh well, uh, you know, I guess I shouldn't have been so malleable. Anyway, amazing episode, great performances. It's a courtroom drama, a lot of mystery, lots of thrills. Great soundtrack, by the way. Great score, I should say. A great score really sets the mood. Yeah, so very, very good episode. Number 7, one I talked about all the way back when I did my Deep Space Nine to Deep Space Nine PowerPoint with the Nerdy Bunch a little while ago, and this is the very, very seminal episode called "The Wounded," which is from season 4, episode 11. It is the one after Data's Day. So following Data's Day, we get this one. So, what is The Wounded about? After being fired upon by a Cardassian vessel, Picard races against time to find out the facts behind excuse me, to find out the facts behind the Cardassian commander's claim that the Federation attacked one of their outposts. Um, this is an episode which, again, is very seminal because it introduces the species of the Cardassians to the Star Trek world. We hadn't seen them before. They were not a part of the original series. And of course, they would then later become very important in Deep Space Nine. To note, if you watch this episode, there are two interesting facts. One is that one of the actors who would play the one of the leads of the Cardassians, who has a lot of lines and is in a lot of scenes, is named. Excuse me. Let me get some water. Pardon me. His name is Mark Alimo, and he plays a different character, but he would later become a recurring character and a very important character called Dukat in Deep Space Nine. So he's in this episode. He was also in an episode sometime before, I think this, he played a Romulan, and then he also played a time traveling human. So he was 3 times in the Next Generation. But they would use him as a recurring character because, of course, Gul Dukat was the superintendent, station commander of Terok Nor, which, of course, became Deep Space Nine. So that's a little fun fact. And then the Cardassians that are in this look very physically different. They have headgear. They're a bit more lizard-like, and they would be redrawn and recharacterized to DS9, but still really, really interesting. So now in the photo, we have two gentlemen, two actors here. We, of course, have Chief Miles O'Brien in the yellow on the right. As I said, recurring character. He goes on to Deep Space Nine, where he becomes a regular part of the cast. But on our left is an actor named Bob Grunin, who you may know, who played the warden in the Shawshank Redemption. Very, very good actor, wonderful actor. And in this episode, he plays Captain Benjamin Maxwell of the U.S.S. Phoenix. Well, Captain Maxwell decided to go rogue in the Cardassian demilitarized zone and started to attack outposts and Cardassian ships because, according to him, the Cardassians were arming for an invasion. Well, Captain Maxwell used to be the commanding officer of Miles O'Brien. They served around a decade prior to the events of the episode, maybe 5 to 10 years before. They served on a starship called the U.S.S. Rutledge, and they actually fought in the Earth Cardassian War, where Benjamin Maxwell lost his wife and his family, and Miles O'Brien has become very traumatized by some of the things that they saw in that battle, including they reference it that the Cardassians, when they killed Commander Maxwell's family, it was on a Federation outpost, and so these two know each other. Of course, they meet again on the Enterprise. He's called in. Miles is called in to talk some sense into Captain Maxwell, and the most of the episode is very, very much like the Heart of Darkness, if you've ever, or Apocalypse Now, which is also adapted from the Heart of Darkness, that novel, that movie, where they're sort of trying to find Colonel Kurtz. Okay. What I love about this episode, again, it's very seminal. The acting is incredible. But this is the very final scene, and again, spoilers. Again, I know with spoilers, but I kind of have to um, give you spoiler alerts. So if that ruins it, it's okay. Come back and whatever. But um, at the very, very final scene, Miles is beamed aboard to the USS Phoenix, and he goes to the ready room of Captain Maxwell. And I believe it was in the first or the second act of the episode. I think it's in the first, but it could be the second. Miles is singing an old song to Keiko. Well, he's actually singing the song, I should say, to himself. And it's an Irish song called The Minstrel Boy. Keiko asks him, what is that? And you know, he says, oh, we used to sing it on the Rutledge. And anyway, long story short, when he's reunited with Maxwell, he sort of asks him, do you remember those days? And they both sing The Minstrel Boy. This is, I think, the first verse. And they're both great singers. I know Bob Grunin, I think, has Irish background, Irish American background. Of course, Chief O'Brien is played by Colm Meaney. Both his character and the actor are from Ireland. And I don't know, it's very bittersweet because, in the end, what they find out is that the Cardassians were actually doing what Benjamin Maxwell thought they were doing. So Benjamin Maxwell gets redeemed. He's not really the antagonist. The antagonists are the Cardassians who are lying and so forth. But you don't know that until sort of the last part of this episode. And I just think it's really bittersweet. It's really nice. These are, people who are traumatized from war. Obviously, it's a sci-fi show, but again, this is kind of the power of Star Trek, right? It's like that's what always blew my mind about Deep Space Nine. They would have actors like Frank Langella and Richard Bremer and all these wonderful character actors and actors who would and Harris Yulin in Duet to talk about the occupation of Cardassia, the Bajorans. I'm like, it's a fictional thing, but I'm so engaged. So this is definitely one of them. It's really the power of Star Trek. And so I just love this little scene at the end. And he kind of gets Maxwell to sort of like withdraw. And again, very seminal for the introduction of the Cardassians. Absolutely. Yep. Love to hate Gul Dukat. What a great actor. I've never watched Star Trek. I'm about to get kicked out of our popular. No, you won't, Joe. Don't worry about it. Thank you there. The difference between men and boys is the price of their toys. I like that. That's a good one, Pete. That's some Mark Postle wisdom. I did that one. Oh, he's from San Diego. Oh, or from San Diego, from Sacramento. Interesting. And there's a park there. That's really cool. LeVar Burton. Yep, Reading Rainbow, all that kind of stuff. Yep. That's really cool. So let me see if there's anything here. All right, let's go on here. Thank you everyone for your comments. I'll come back in a few slides. Where's that comment? There we go. All right, now for my number 6. This episode, oh my dear Lord. So because this is Preemptive Strike, and this is from season 7, episode 24. This is the episode that comes right before All Good Things. So even though that's a 2-part episode, if you want to make it one, it would be considered the second to last episode of the entire series. Because of that, it spent many, many years unnoticed and unloved until, and I'll get into this in a moment, until just last year, I think, or the year before, and I'll explain in a moment. So, what is Preemptive Strike about? Okay. Following her return from advanced tactical training, Bajoran Ro Laren is sent to infiltrate the Maquis and finds herself torn between her loyalty to Picard and Starfleet and her sympathy with the Maquis fighting the good fight. Anybody who knows me knows I love the Bajorans. They're incredible. A lot of that has to do with Deep Space Nine. In fact, the role of Kira which eventually became Kira, was first offered to Michelle Forbes to have Ro Laren be the second in command, of Deep Space Nine, and for whatever reason at the time she turned it down. I still think Kira, and especially Nana Visitor, rocks it out of the park, knocks it and rocks it out of the park in that series. She is incredible. So who knows? It would have been a different show. But I love Ro Laren. I want to say that she is introduced in the first season of episode 5, but let me just figure that out, because Michelle Forbes, is absolutely incredible. So she, of course, comes aboard the Enterprise as like someone who's very, it's that word, like undisciplined. And it's from season 5, episode 3, from October 7th, 1991. So she's very undisciplined, very hard-headed, pretty arrogant, doesn't really insubordinate, and so forth. And then eventually, she goes and has a number of recurring episodes around season 5 and 6, and then we really don't see her in season 7 until this episode, when again they say that she's back from an advanced tactical training. So again, the synopsis pretty much gives a good idea here. She comes back from her training. It's been rough on her, but there's this assignment to infiltrate the Maquis. Well, she does this. For those who don't know the Maquis storyline is a personal favorite of mine. I love it. Again, it gets into way more details at Deep Space Nine, which is airing at this time, by the way. It's airing around, I think, around late season 6 is when Deep Space Nine aired, because it started airing in January. So it was already in season 6, second half of season 6 of Next Generation. So the Maquis are a group of, if you want to call them resistance fighters or terrorists, it's kind of hard to know. I would call them resistance fighters because I don't think they do terrorist stuff. However, when the Bajorans and the Cardassians, when the Cardassian occupation of Bajor ended, there was a treaty that was signed between the Federation, the Bajorans, and the Cardassians. And so a section of space that was once in Federation territory becomes a part of Cardassian territory. And these planets, which has had humans there and Federation citizens, are essentially told to vacate. They fight back. There's a whole storyline. Um, and they also kind of do commit some stuff against, Cardassians. They fight against Cardassians, and eventually, if you know Voyager, the first episode especially, Chakotay, B'Elanna, are members of the Maquis, as well as many of the members that could then get folded into Voyager. So that's also pretty important as well. So Ensign Ro infiltrates this after her training, and while she's in this village, she's getting to know the members of the Maquis, and she gets to know an older gentleman who is a Bajoran. She makes for him something called hasperat, which anyone can make. You take a tortilla, like a soft tortilla shell, you put some cream cheese or something and some hot peppers, and you roll it up and you eat it. Of course, I've had it before. There are recipes online. Thank you very much. And The Cardassians actually infiltrate. They kill this old man, and she sort of becomes, which is her friend, and she becomes more and more stronger with the Maquis. She is sent back to the Enterprise, and in the photo that we have here on the right, she actually pulls a phaser on Riker, and he says, I hope you get what you're looking for. Hope you find what you're looking for." Because one of the things with Ensign Ro, she doesn't fit into Star Trek, or she doesn't fit, excuse me, into the Enterprise, I should say, and she definitely doesn't really even fit in with other Bajorans. And so she actually has found a group of people, the Maquis, who she does, really accept her, and she goes off to join the Maquis. Fast forward, and I'm going to look up this episode. Um, Incredible episode of the season 3 of Star Trek Picard, which the um, first two seasons I was not a fan of. Okay, I did not like them, and then the third season comes out, and this is one of my favorite episodes, legitimately, one of my absolute favorite episodes of Star Trek. I would say maybe my top 10. And it is an episode called Imposters from 2013. So that's 29 years later. And again, spoiler alert, please, for the love of God, if you love Star Trek The Next Generation, you don't have to watch seasons 1 or 2 of Picard. You have to watch season 3. And when you get to this episode, which is, I think, in the middle of the seasons, she comes back. Now, I had no idea that Ensign Ro was going to come back. So I literally freaked out. Now, I'm a very, I'm kind of a Star Trek purist. I don't really like much after 2009. I don't really like the Kelvin timeline, Star Trek 2009. I don't like Into Darkness or Beyond. Not a fan of Discovery. I've not seen Strange New Worlds, so I can't judge it. I do like Lower Decks. Haven't really seen much. I haven't seen the Section 31 movie or whatever. So I can't be judgmental necessarily because, they moved in a different direction. That's just not for me. But holy hell, do I love the fact that 29 years later, somebody talked about this episode. There's dialogue between Ensign Ro and Admiral Picard, or no, she's not a captain, I think, and Picard and Ro, and they're talking about this episode, which I, honest to God, thought everyone had forgot about. So you can imagine my jaw was on the ground. I was like cheering, and I didn't like the first 2 seasons of Picard. So the care that they took, the fact that people talked about it, the fact now it's in like Star Trek canon, like she comes back, they talk about her going to the Maquis. I was like, "Oh my god, am I dreaming? Like, is this a dream?" And so it's one of the reasons why, even though it kinda got lost in the fact that the next episode was the series finale, which was a fantastic series finale, which I watched, as I said, at Skydome all those years ago. I'm just happy that somebody remembered it. So, I nerded out quite a bit. So I really enjoyed that. And yes, season 3 of Picard was amazing, absolutely amazing. And again, sorry if I spoil anything. I really apologize for the spoilers, but that episode, Imposters, yeah, my top 10, probably, between 8, not 8, 9, or 10, but still in my top 10 favorite episodes of any series in Star Trek history. So that's going from original, TNG, whatever. I don't have that many favorites of Voyager, but I got a lot of the original series. I got a lot on this show, and I got a lot from Deep Space Nine. And Imposters is right there. So I nerded out big time. The next one is number 5. This is Chain of Command, part 1 and 2. This is our first of 2 parts. This aired in season 6, episodes 10 and 11. In the first episode, Picard is replaced as captain of the Enterprise, so he, Lieutenant Worf, and Dr. Crusher go on a top secret mission into Cardassian space. Meanwhile, his replacement, Captain Jellicoe, love that guy, meets his new command with some resistance from the crew. And in episode number 2, while the humorless Captain Jellicoe leads the effort to prevent a Cardassian invasion. I said Kardashian invasion, not those lizards. I'm talking about the Cardassian invasion. Huh. It's a little confusing to get those two lizard people, mixed up. Picard is captured and tortured by a ruthless interrogator in an attempt to break him. This is very famously There Are Four Lights episode. You can see the photo. This gentleman is the actor who just passed away a few years ago, named David Warner. He was a British actor. Actually, I think worked with Patrick Stewart in the past, so it was really interesting. You can see that there are four lights behind him. Well, in the first part, as mentioned, um, an admiral comes on board, tells Picard about this mission where they have to go to Cardassia, and they go to like the catacombs inside Cardassia, and they're on a very special mission, like a special ops mission. And so Jellicoe comes in. I want to say he came from the U.S.S. Cairo, which was an Excelsior class, I believe. And he's just different. Uh, he's very matter of fact, very sure of himself, and he even does two things that are very interesting. One is he changes the schedule of the Enterprise, which normally has three shifts: ABC, Alpha, Alpha, Beta, and I guess Charlie or Gamma. Actually, it should be Gamma, Alpha, Beta, Gamma. And he changes it to four, so Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, and that kind of pisses off Riker. But another one is that he gets Counselor Troy into his ready room and says that he would appreciate it if she wore a standard uniform on the bridge. Because for these, 6 seasons, or these full 5 seasons and 10 episodes, 11 episodes, she had been wearing civilian clothes. And from that point onward, Maria Sirtis, Counselor Troy, continues to wear her blue uniform on the bridge. It's very interesting. So even though he was kind of a dick, she listened and she made that amends. And I love him. He's great. He has this wonderful, wonderful thing where they bring a bunch of Cardassians on board, and they wait for like 2 hours, and he's on the bridge. Jellicoe, played by Ronnie Cox, wonderful actor. You've seen him in RoboCop and a lot of other movies. And he's like, "Okay, tell the Cardassians that I'm a hothead, and you know I might explode, and all this kind of stuff." Of course, I'm paraphrasing. And then as soon as he leaves, Riker's like, "He's sure of himself," and Troy's like, "Nope." All right, well, I'll paraphrase, but it's a great scene. In the end, of course, they do find Captain Picard. He is in the second, mostly in the first and second episode. He is getting tortured by this gentleman, this Gull or whatever his name is, who keeps telling Picard that he wants him to say that there were five lights, and that's how he's going to break. Very 1984, right? And he keeps gaslighting Picard and saying there are four lights, there are four lights. In the end, when Picard is rescued, this is when he turns back and says, "There are four lights," and I love it. Humiliates Picard, and so forth. So anyway, wonderful performances by David Warner, um, and of course by Patrick Stewart, but also Ronnie Cox and the whole cast. So really good action, adventure, thriller, um, uh, uh, a two-parter, which is really thrilling, really nice one. After this, we're going to go to Tapestry, which is from season 6, episode 15. Full disclosure, and I don't know if I'll lose any fans over this, I don't like Q. I find him to be very annoying, not very fun, and very tedious. Um, I don't like him. Didn't like him in Farpoint. I didn't like him in the one where he gives fantasy women to Riker. What was that one where we get the Picard face bomb? I forget that Q who or Q whatever. I think that's from like season 3 or 4. I don't like him. I don't didn't like him in Deep Space Nine. I think he only showed up once or twice. Didn't like him in Voyager. Don't like him. But in this one, I love him because this is a Q episode. Um, and it says here, of course, when Captain Picard's artificial heart fails, he is offered the rare opportunity to go back in time and set right the mistake that led to his demise. So in this episode, Picard is in the sick bay. I think that he had been on an away mission and something went wrong. And you can see that there's this like burn mark on his chest. And I think he dies, if I'm not mistaken, or at least his heart stops. And then he goes to this big white room, and Q comes in and says, "I'm God," and all this kind of stuff. So they talk about his artificial heart, and he talks about how he got it. So then they go back in time, and when Picard is just out of the academy, so he probably was 21, 22, I think, or 23, and he's on a station. We see two of his classmates, one male, one female. He has a lot of feelings for the female classmate, but he doesn't end up. I think does he or no? He in real life he goes for it, makes a move, I think, but then they sleep together. Doesn't matter. Anyways, extraneous information. I'm just trying to see how that worked out. I think he doesn't he doesn't make a move on her in real life and like during the real time, but then they do sleep together, which causes a rift in this Q's timeline. So long story short, when Captain Picard is young, he's very impulsive and he makes a lot of rash decisions that of course he regrets. So when they're on this station, when they're cadets, he has a game. They're playing a game like pool, which is called Damjat. And there's a group of Nausicaans, which are very tall, almost beastly-like alien species. And this is the famous line: "Is play Damjat, human?" And so they play this like Damjat game, and they find out that the Nausicaans are cheating, and Captain Picard gets stabbed through the heart, and eventually he has to have an artificial heart. So the Nausicaan stabs him through the back, through the heart. And he's telling you that he kind of regrets this. He regrets his impulsivity. He regrets taking these chances in his youth. So then, as we see on the photo, Q shows him a future in which he essentially did not really, um, what would be the word? He wasn't proactive and he didn't really bring anything to the table. He didn't take chances. He always played it safe. And in this photo, he is a junior science officer on the Enterprise with the rank of lieutenant junior grade. That's only one rank higher than ensign. And at this period of time, that's got to be like 40 years with one or more with one promotion. And that's not good. So in this scene, Mr. Picard sees Counselor Troy and Riker in 10 forward. This is where they are. That's the bar. And he sits down and he's trying to ask Commander Riker, who is in charge of the duty roster. So he's first officer's in charge of like promotions and so forth. It's one of his duties, like an admin duty. And he says, like, no, like you've been fine, but you haven't really done anything, and you're older now, and like he rejects him. And of course, it leads to a very interesting um, monologue with Patrick Stewart playing Picard saying, Q, end this now. Q, end this now. Stop. I don't want to be this person lacking ambition and all this kind of thing. And then eventually he comes out of it. His heart is repaired. And Picard is laughing when he kind of comes out of this. So just a really interesting thing about, not regretting your past, even though you made some impulsive, you know, um, maybe destructive things. It sort of led you to be the person you are today. And in Picard's case, if he had always played it safe, then he would have ended up not having a career. This man is just coasting through life, always taking it easy. And can you imagine one promotion in like 40 years? Because I think Picard is supposed to be, Patrick Stewart at this point was in his early 50s, but Picard would have been older. So it's like, that's at least 40 years with one promotion. It's heartbreaking, but obviously Picard understands now taking those risks when he was younger led to the person that he was. So I love Tapestry. It's a really, really great, fantastic, episode. I want to go back here a little bit. Hey, Power Lines. Oh, Power Lines and Huckleberry. You can be part of my Mark Apostles if you want. Just let me know. I'll put you guys on because you're always here, and I think that you guys would be great additions to that. Um, Let me see here. Shell, Kardashians and the Cardassians. There's a meme. I love this meme. It's keeping up with the Cardassians, and someone on Photoshop has basically made the Cardassians, Chloe, Courtney, all those individuals uh, as Cardassians. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen. I know. Q is super annoying. I don't like him. I just whatever. Um, yeah, he's not nice. That's true. Disliking Q. Yeah, I don't know what it is about him. Anyway, he does his job. Whatever. Um, let's see here. Irishman, I liked Q's first appearance, and it was something different, but grew rather bored. Yeah, agreed. Very much agreed. So there you go. Ooh, okay. Huckleberry, ding, 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 ding. You're the first to respond. You are now Mark Postle number 6. It's going on my phone, and therefore it is locked in. Okay. I am putting Huckleberry. Huckleberry is number 6. Number 7 is open, Power Lines. If you would like it, number 7 is open. Lucky number 7. Well, we got Huckleberry. Mark Postle number 6. It comes with no monetary or fiduciary advances, but I will like you and I will respect you in that way. Let's move on, okay? From Tapestry. Number 3 is an episode called The Defector. It goes to an early season 3 episode, as I mentioned. Who Watches the Watchers comes out, and it's like, oh, well, this is what Star Trek can do. It's getting better. I love this episode. I understand that this episode might not be like the best. It's certainly not the worst. I would say it's like middle to upper tier, right? So like maybe out of 10, it's like 8, 8.5. But I love it. Okay. When I mentioned that I had been watching Star Trek on Fox on WUTV, this was one that I remember watching when I was a teenager, and I was like, damn, this is great. Like, it's a much smaller story, mostly drama, um, but great performances. I really like the story. By the way, I love the Romulans. So it's one of these episodes of TNG. Romulans are, to me, they're the best Romulans we've ever seen. They've butchered Romulans. I'm sorry, in 2009 and after, the Romulans, they're not my Romulans. I do love the Romulans in TOS, the original series, especially Balance of Terror. That's when we first see the Romulans. They're great Romulans. There's nothing to me like a TNG Romulan, okay? So this episode says when a Romulan officer defects to the Federation, with a warning of an impending invasion, Captain Picard struggles to decide if he is to be believed. The gentleman here in the picture, the character, I should say, is Admiral Jirac, and he is played by an amazing actor, one of my favorite television actors, named James Sloyan. He's worked for years, still alive. He's 84 years old. Um, he did a bunch of episodes of Murder She Wrote. I find his voice is very distinctive, very soothing voice. He is also the father of an actor named Samantha Sloyan. Anyone here, I highly recommend. If you go to Netflix, you can watch two miniseries from Mike Flanagan. One is called Midnight Mass, one of my absolute favorite miniseries, horror miniseries I've seen. And his daughter plays Bev. She is incredible. And then the most recent one of his was called The Fall of the House of Usher, based on the short story from Edgar Allan Poe. And she's also in that. So he's an incredible actor. His daughter is an incredible actor. So, just, runs in the family. Absolutely amazing. So Admiral Jirac, who again is here on the right, um, he approaches the Enterprise in a Romulan scout ship. He's taken aboard because he requests asylum, and he tells Picard and the crew that the Romulans are gearing up for an invasion of the Federation. So during the episode, again, it's all about, do we believe him? Do we not believe him? Finally, he says that this invasion fleet is they're being constructed bases and docks. There's an entire legion assigned to a planet called Nelvana 3, which, if I'm not mistaken, is either in the neutral zone or it's in Romulan space. Again, um, kind of inconsequential at this point, but they go to Nelvana 3 and they find out there's no invasion force. It was a loyalty test. And of course, Admiral Jirac fails that test. What I really love about this episode, um, not just the performances, not just the writing, it's very suspenseful. It's a really good thriller. But tragically, and I think this guy's a hero, by the way, of Star Trek, an unsung hero. So when it comes to terms that this was a farce, he realizes he can't see his family again. And so he mentions that he has a daughter. So he's found in his quarters. He's committed suicide, which, of course, if he's part of the Tal Shiar, which is the intelligence agency, so that would be routine. If you get caught, you would take a pill or whatever. So he does that, and he has a letter to his daughter, and it's really like kind of sweet. I think I don't know what gets me. It's a really cool, interesting thing. Um, because right at the very end of the episode, Picard basically says, like, that we can't send this to his daughter, like it's almost futile. But what I kind of think is interesting is by the end of Deep Space Nine, the Romulans, the Klingons, the Federation, they all come together to fight the Dominion. So in just a few years, there's this potential hope that because the Romulans and the Federation do team up, this unsung hero in this episode that I love, that I've been watching for 20 years, 25 years, that this admiral, this fictional admiral, his daughter gets to, read his letter. It's one of these quintessential episodes. It's just one that kept coming on. I've seen it a lot. I watched this one a lot before I go to bed. I said I remember watching it for the first time in my room on my television, my small television that we used to have, 13 inches or whatever. My my TV VCR combination from RVC um, or RCV. What is that? Radio something doesn't matter. Or Sharp, maybe it was a Sharp. Anyway, I just love it. I think it's such a great episode. The acting is great. The writing is great. Again, may not be these big episodes that I mentioned before. Maybe there are better episodes, but certainly I think it's in the upper kind of tier. And I love the Romulans. I love the actors. I love the story. I love the sacrifice. I love the little bit of hopefulness that his letter will get read. I know that's weird. I know we are talking about a fictional show, but like I feel that this is what media does. This is what good storytelling does. I care about Admiral Giroir. I don't know why I should be, but I do, So I care that his daughter reads this. And again, I've been watching it for like 25 years. So it's just really nice, really bittersweet, very powerful, I think, and just one that always has stayed with me. And that's another thing about some of these episodes that I consider to be my favorites is they have a lasting impression. Because there's a lot of these episodes. I mentioned 176 episodes. Then Deep Space Nine, I think, has over maybe 172 or something. And, that's a lot of content. That's a lot of time. The ones that are kind of burned into my brain are the ones that are on this list that I also keep going back to. And this one, I think this year I've watched already 2, 3 times. Last year, I must have watched it at least once a month. Year before, probably maybe once every couple months. So anyway, one of my favorites. If you are already a Star Trek fan, this is kind of the thing where I wouldn't really introduce people who aren't new if they don't know who the Romulans are. Maybe when someone's beginning their fandom and they know about the Romulans, then you introduce them. So certainly, like Who Watches the Watchers is a bit more appropriate. Maybe Tapestry is also a good one. And then for sure, like Data's Day, those are more introduction. This is like, wetting their whistle after they've had a couple of drinks, so to speak. In this case, watching episodes. After this, uh, this is an incredible episode. I know all of you who watch Star Trek: The Next Generation know this episode and are probably not surprised to see this at number 2. But this is The Inner Light. This is from season 5, episode 25. And in this episode, Picard awakes to find himself living in a small village where he is a well known member of the community who is suffering from a delusion of being a star ship captain. In this episode, the Enterprise encounters a probe in an uncharted area of space. The probe scans the Enterprise, and then Picard is rendered unconscious. He wakes up in a village where his name is Cayman. He has a wife, has a son, his grandchildren, and he's living an entire life. And at first, he's saying like, I shouldn't be here. I'm Picard. I come from a spaceship, and they're all gaslighting him, saying, "No, you're Cayman. You're a village elder." And as the story moves forward, Cayman gets older. He realizes that the sun in their solar system is going to go supernova, which means it's going to destroy their planet and everyone who's there. So they try multiple times to prevent it. But eventually, by the end of the episode, he realizes that they're sending this probe, which is like a time capsule, into space. So anyone who what's the word discovers it will experience it. Really what it is he's in a hollow simulation. Okay, so he's scanned and part of him becomes into this hollow thing, but he's there for what, 30 years, 40 years. In real time it's only 25 minutes. So Picard experiences an entire life, to the part where when he's an old man, he's fully convinced that he was never Captain Picard. And one of the things is this flute that he's playing, very, very famous. It's called a Raskin flute, I think. which is a fictional flute, and he has a certain melody that he plays, and he plays it throughout the episode. And when he recovers, and they say to him, "You were only out for 25 minutes," and he's very surprised because in his head it's been at least 40 years or something. The probe also has a box with the flute, and you see the flute. For example, he plays the flute in Fistful of Datas, which I think is in the next season or the season after. He's playing it with Mozart. And then in season 6, there's an episode called Lessons, which is very famously the one where Picard has a girlfriend from the science department, and they play it, and then in the movies and so forth, it's referenced. That flute was recently sold for almost $200,000 at auction. It's absolutely incredible. What I really love about this is it's just really bittersweet. On one hand, it's extremely devastating, right? You have an entire civilization of people who had been gone for 1,000 years, and a last ditch effort to for anyone to just find out about their entire civilization. They bring up this probe, but you could also say, on the other hand, it's kind of optimistic because at least Captain Picard got to experience their lives. And then he's going to write a report and he's going to be able to share, which he does, by the way, with later in Lessons. He tells his girlfriend, his lieutenant commander, I think she is girlfriend, or I think she's a geologist or something. This is what happened to me. So it's very important to him. So it's bittersweet. It's really bittersweet. There's tons of tragedy, but then there's kind of an optimistic side that he can pass on, from this entire lost civilization. And it is such a beautiful episode. I also want to note that Patrick Stewart's own son, Daniel, plays uh, Kamen. So when Captain Picard is in this simulation, he has a son, and he's played by Patrick Stewart's real life son. Again, bittersweet, sad, touching, but also kind of optimistic in many other ways. And certainly, again, one of the absolute best written, directed stories. It's also Patrick Stewart's favorite episode of the entire series. Okay, no Mark Postles. That's fine. No worries. Believe me, I understand. Had a 13-inch Sharp TV. Still have it in my basement. Well, when I come to Buffalo, we will watch Star Trek: The Next Generation on it. And okay, we'll have some calzones. All right, get to my number one. I don't think this is going to be a shocker to anybody, but my absolute first favorites is The Best of Both Worlds. I should say both worlds. My freaking apologies here. The Best of Both World, I put. No, it's The Best of Both Worlds. Parts 1 and 2. Season 3, episode 26, and season 4, episode 1. Just before I get to that, to the synopsis and to the photo, um, a little background is that for this episode is that um, Patrick Stewart had only signed a 3-year contract to do the Next Generation. The first 2 seasons, he really didn't like it very much, but by the time the 3rd season happened, he saw that it had been picked up. So there was a chance that Patrick Stewart was not going to sign for a 4th season. He ended up doing it, of course, and so we got Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2. But Best of Both Worlds Part 1 starts really with Riker. He has just turned, I think, 35, somewhere around there. He's had his birthday. And he's really, he's the second in command of the Enterprise. It's also been known that an admiral comes on board with Commander Shelby. So, an admiral and Commander Shelby, who will be very important to the story later, comes on board. The admiral and says, like, we've been offering Riker commands of the ships, like the Melbourne, which is an Excelsior class ship, and a bunch of others, and he keeps turning it down, like he's slowing his career down. He's just turned 35. He's, becoming more experienced, but it's like he's in this real rut, and it's really interesting. So in comes Commander Shelby, who's younger than he is, lieutenant commander, very plucky, she's probably late 20s, reminds Riker of who he used to be, and they kind of get on each other's nerves. So the first one really starts off as a Riker focus episode because I think they had plans. If Patrick Stewart had not signed on for season 4, I think Riker and Shelby were supposed to take over. So Riker becomes captain, and then Shelby becomes the first officer, if I'm not mistaken. Long story short, it ends with a cliffhanger. Tell Starfleet we have engaged the Borg, and it goes Papa, Papa. I love it. But by the time fourth season starts, of course, season 4 begins. Patrick Stewart, is up into the end. He's, still playing Picard as of last year, and this is when he gets to become part of the Borg. So, first episode says responding to a distress call on one of the Federation's most outer colonies. The Enterprise arrives only to find a big hole in the ground where the town used to be, and discovers the Borg are behind the attack in season 2, or excuse me, in episode 2, part 2, so season 4, episode 1. Having absorbed Captain Picard and his knowledge, the Borg head for Earth, leaving Riker and the Enterprise desperate for an unanticipated way to defeat them. In the end, that admiral goes off, and there's a link, of course, to Deep Space Nine. In Deep Space Nine, that ship, which is called, I think, the Melbourne, if I'm not mistaken, and the Saratoga, which is a Cisco ship, engaged the Borg at the Battle of Wolf 359. Many of those ships are destroyed, including the Admiral is killed. And of course, Cisco's wife is killed. He takes Jake, and then eventually, a few years later, he becomes part of Deep Space Nine, which is also interesting because in the first 2 episodes, the adversary of Deep Space Nine, he confronts a Picard about the Wolf 359, and so on. So this is, of course, the picture of Jean-Luc Picard as a Borg. He was a Locutus of Borg. Had he not signed on, for the 4th season, then Patrick Stewart or Jean-Luc Picard would just be off as Locutus somewhere. But of course, they had to go and save him, which they do. Data's there, Worf is there. I think Dr. Crusher goes to the sphere, and they end up, preventing a Borg attack, I think, of the Earth. But with all these starships, I think they said 35 or 36 starships are destroyed in Wolf 359. 11,000 officers are killed. May their deaths not be in vain to the brave, brave souls who fought and died at the Battle of Wolf 359. Shell knows what I mean. I've made reference to that a couple of weeks ago, Shell. And that is my absolute favorite episodes. These are my 10 favorite episodes. Let's go all the way back to the beginning now. Just to do a wrap up at number 10, Who Watches the Watchers? Number 9 is Data's Day. 8 is The Drumhead. 7 is The Wounded. 6 is Preemptive Strike. Again, the fact that they mentioned it 29 years later, I love it. Chain of Command, part 1 and 2 for number 5. Number 4 is Tapestry. 3 is The Defector. 2 is The Inner Light. And of course, The Best of Both Worlds, part 1 and 2 are my favorites. Let's see here. Yes, Ashley Judd. Yes, I remember Ashley Judd was in Darmok, and then she was in The Game. Darmok, of course, is a great episode. That would be on my, I guess you could say, my honors mention. Darmok and Gelada Tanagra. Darmok and When the Walls Fall. That's a really cool episode. I really like that one. I really like that one. Yeah, Dharma and Druk. And then she's in The Game, which is when they put the thing here. I love The Game. So the game starts. The game starts when Riker is sleeping with this random alien who just introduces into this game, which then they try to take over the ship. Like, how irresponsible is Riker? It's hilarious. Anyway, fair play selecting 10. Yeah, there's just too many good ones. You're right. And to attempt to whittle them down. Yeah, thank you, Shell. Thank you. We do in where I come from, we do not joke about the Battle of Wolf 359. Okay, which is also why in Picard season 3 when we meet what's that guy's name? That captain who was on the USS Constance, Captain Shaw, and he confronts Picard and says, "I was on the Constance." Oh, mwah. But it's not Riker's fault. It's really, or excuse me, it's not Picard's fault. He was, he was in a cult, and so and so there it is. Anyway, thank you, everyone. I'm going to be back next week with another topic. By the end of the week, by Friday, please look at my community tab, and I'm going to again present to you two different options that I can talk about for next week, two different ideas or things that are going on, and I'm going to make a time limit. So probably by 6 p.m. my time next Sunday will be the limit for when we can vote, and then after that, I'll just make the thumbnail and all that stuff. Thank you for listening to me talk about how much I love preemptive strike. You have no, or in the defector, you have no idea how much that means to me. I could nerd out all day. Again, it's really weird when you grow up and things that you forget, are then back in pop culture. It's weird, but I love it. Thank you for being here. We have all of our Mark Postles, and that's okay, power lines. Don't worry, I will recruit a seventh Mark Postle. But we've had all 6 Mark Postles so far, and you were all here, which again is a very much a Voltronic experience. Maybe we'll have magic underwear. I don't know. Um, Eventually, I'll get memberships, and we can figure out levels. To note, though, there will be no level where I tell you who I really am, unlike Scientology. I'm just an open book. Yeah, next week, look out for that. Thanks, everyone, for being here. It was really a pleasure. And I think next month I'll probably do my top 10 Simpsons episodes, which they have even more episodes. I mean, gosh, they've been going on for 35 years or something. Anyway, there's a lot of good ones I like on that one. Secret handshake can work. A secret handshake will work. That's a good one. It won't be a very hard one. It'll be like a regular handshake, but I'll make something happen. In the meantime, I wish all of you who are watching a very good week. If you're watching this on replay, do not forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Please give this video a like also. Um, and I will be back next week. So until then, I just want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you so much.